Katie Simpson wasn't looking for love. She had packed her carry-on with neatly organized notes, printed out schedules, and 2 pre-highlighted presentations for the Human Rights Congress in Washington, D.C. Everything was supposed to be predictable, professional, and, above all, peaceful, until she met him. He was the kind of man you'd cross the airport to avoid. Tall, smug, and too good-looking for his own good. Jonathan Priestley, renowned cardiologist and walking ego, was on the same flight, heading to a prestigious medical congress. Their worlds weren't supposed to collide. But fate, as always, had a better story to write. Before we dive deeper into this unexpected romance, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments what kind of love story you want to hear next. Your interaction keeps this channel alive and helps us bring more touching stories to you. Katie hesitated for a second before sitting 2 stools away from him. Close enough to hear the bartender ask if she wanted the same as yesterday. She shook her head. "Something stronger," she said, not looking at Jonathan. He raised his glass in her direction, a teasing smile playing on his lips. "Here's to unexpected reunions." She didn't return the gesture. "You think everything is a joke, don't you?" "Not everything," he replied. "Just most things." There was silence between them, save for the quiet hum of the bar's jazz playlist and the occasional clink of glasses. Katie sipped her drink and tried not to look at him, but something in his posture, relaxed, confident, annoyingly at ease, made it difficult. "I still can't believe you took my seat," she muttered. "I didn't take it. We were both assigned the same one. Not my fault you don't believe in fate." "Fate doesn't double-book airline seats," she snapped, but her voice was softer now. Jonathan tilted his head. "Maybe not. But it does love irony." Katie tried to stifle a smile and failed. "You're insufferable. And yet here you are," he said, his eyes locking with hers. A beat passed between them. Fragile moment. And then she laughed. Genuinely this time. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the absurdity of the situation. Maybe it was him. That night they didn't talk about work. Not law, not medicine. They talked about favorite books, places they wanted to visit, childhood memories. Jonathan told her about his fear of water, despite being born in California. Katie shared her obsession with maps and how she used to draw imaginary countries as a child. Hours passed like minutes. When she finally stood to leave, Katie hesitated. "This was unexpected." Jonathan nodded. "In a good way." He paused. "I haven't decided yet." The elevator ride up was silent. Charged. As the doors opened on her floor, Katie turned to him. "Good night, Jonathan." "Good night, Katie." No touch. No kiss. Just a look. But it lingered longer than it should have. The next morning, Katie woke up with a strange feeling. Restless energy buzzed beneath her skin. She blamed it on too little sleep and too much whiskey. But when she entered the hotel's breakfast lounge and saw Jonathan sitting at a corner table, reading the paper like a scene out of a romantic movie, she knew better. She turned to leave. But he'd already seen her. "Katie," he called. "Over here." She contemplated pretending not to hear. Then, to her own surprise, walked over and sat down. "Are we making this a habit?" she asked. He folded the paper. We could. She rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched at the corners. That day, their paths crossed again, this time at a shared keynote session between the human rights and medical congresses. The room was packed. Katie found herself seated next to him once more, as if fate had reserved the seat. The speaker discussed global collaboration across fields, lawyers and doctors working together to protect vulnerable populations. Jonathan leaned closer, whispering, "Looks like the universe ships us." Katie elbowed him gently. "Stop." But she didn't move away. When the session ended, they exited together. Outside, D.C. buzzed with life. The air was crisp, the cherry blossoms just starting to bloom. "Walk with me," Jonathan said. She hesitated only a second. They walked through Lafayette Square, pausing near the park's iconic fountain. Children played nearby. A violinist filled the air with gentle notes. "I'm sorry about the plane," Jonathan said suddenly. Katie turned. "For real?" He nodded. "You were right. I should have been more polite. I was having a rough morning." "You hide that well," she said softly. "I'm good at hiding things." There was something in his voice. Something unguarded. Vulnerable. It tugged at her. They stood in silence until Katie asked, "Why cardiology?" He smiled. "Because hearts are messy. Complicated. But when they work, they keep everything else alive. Kind of like love, I guess." Katie stared at him. "That's unexpectedly poetic." Jonathan shrugged. "Don't tell my colleagues." She laughed again, and this time it felt like a choice. That evening, Katie returned to her room and found herself staring out at the city lights. She thought of her carefully organized itinerary, her highlighted papers, her planned speeches. None of them prepared her for him. She didn't know if this was just distraction or destiny. But something in her heart, messy, complicated, alive, told her it was the beginning of something real. She picked up her phone and typed a message. "Thanks for the walk today." 3 dots appeared. "Jonathan, thanks for not running away." "Katie, don't get used to it." "Jonathan, too late." She smiled. Whatever this was, it had started. And she wasn't ready to stop it. That night at the bar ended with a strange kind of silence between them. Not awkward, not angry, just unresolved. Katie returned to her room, replaying his smirk, his voice, the way his fingers circled the rim of the glass while he listened to her speak. She didn't want to like him. The next morning came fast. She hurried through breakfast, buried in a stack of notes for her next panel, mentally preparing to moderate a discussion about refugee policies. Yet as she walked toward the elevator, there he was, again. Jonathan. Freshly shaven, black coffee in hand, a rolled-up medical journal tucked under his arm. "Are you stalking me?" she asked, half joking. He pressed the elevator button. "Just getting coffee." "You?" "Just trying to get through my day without seeing you." The elevator doors opened, and they stepped in together. Silence. Tension. Then the elevator jolted. Up. Lights flickered. Katie gasped. Jonathan immediately pressed the emergency button. "Relax," he said. "It's probably just a glitch." "I hate small spaces," she whispered. For the first time, his tone softened. "Hey, look at me." She turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. That ocean blue gaze wasn't arrogant anymore. It was calm, focused, present. "You're okay. I've been through worse. We'll be out soon." And just like that, her breath evened. He talked to her. About his work, about a child he once treated whose heart had stopped in his arms. How fear doesn't go away, but you can talk through it. His voice was steady, warm. 15 minutes later, the elevator came back to life. They stepped out in silence again, but something had shifted. The air between them wasn't just heated with friction anymore. It was charged with possibility. That evening, she saw him at the rooftop lounge of the hotel, seated alone, staring at the skyline. This time it was she who approached. "Mind if I join?" He looked up, slightly surprised. "Be my guest." They didn't talk about conferences. They talked about life. About the absurd pressure of expectations. About childhood. About ambition. She shared how her mother had taught her never to back down from defending the defenseless. He shared that he used to play the piano, until the noise of life drowned the music out. Their laughs were quieter now, more honest. The kind of laughs that linger. When she finally rose to leave, he stood too. "You're not what I expected," she said. "Neither are you," he replied. "And thank God for that." The next 2 days blurred together like pages in a fast-turning book. Katie found herself looking for him between panels. Not that she would admit it, but every time she spotted that navy blazer or caught his laugh across the hotel lobby, something tightened in her chest. Jonathan wasn't much better. He declined a dinner with a famous surgeon just to stay at the hotel bar, by coincidence, where Katie appeared with her laptop, pretending to read. They became rhythm, unspoken, natural, but not uncomplicated. One night, after a long day, they ended up walking down the National Mall, the glow of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting in their eyes. Katie shared a story about a child from Sudan whose asylum case she had fought for years, and won. Jonathan listened quietly. "You fight for people who've lost everything," he said. "That must hurt sometimes." She nodded. "All the time. But I'd rather carry their pain than let them carry it alone." He looked at her like he'd never seen her before. "You're extraordinary." Katie turned to him. "You're not so bad yourself. Once you drop the God complex." He laughed, and in that moment, something electric passed between them. But right then her phone rang. It was her office. A client's case had taken a dark turn. She had to return immediately to Connecticut after her closing panel the next evening. "Duty calls," she whispered, already feeling the thread between them fraying. Jonathan looked away. "Figures. When I finally meet someone who challenges me in all the right ways." Katie smiled sadly. This wasn't supposed to be anything. Maybe it still isn't. But I don't want it to end here. The next day they barely saw each other. Both swamped. Both pretending the goodbye wouldn't sting. That night Katie checked out late. Rain had started to fall. She rolled her suitcase through the slick pavement outside the Mayfair, heart heavy. Then she heard footsteps. Jonathan. No umbrella. Just standing there getting soaked. "You forgot something," he said. She looked puzzled. "What?" And then he stepped closer, kissed her softly, just once. "You forgot to say goodbye." Tears blurred her vision as she whispered, "Maybe this isn't goodbye." And just like that they parted. But nothing would ever be the same. Back in her city, Katie threw herself into work as if paperwork could put out emotional fires. Court cases, emergency meetings, press interviews, sleepless nights. None of it was enough to erase the memory of Jonathan. At night, alone in her apartment, her mind returned to that kiss. Brief, unexpected, but etched into her like ink on skin. She wasn't one to get attached. She didn't believe in fate. But there was something about Jonathan that disarmed her without asking for permission. He, in turn, tried to go on with life in Boston. Seeing patients, giving lectures, performing complex surgeries, receiving praise from colleagues. But it all felt mechanical, soulless. Sometimes he'd pick up his phone and type her number. Then delete it. "You're acting like a teenager," his co-worker joked during a late shift. "Either call her or stop walking around like a zombie." Jonathan let out a dry laugh. "I don't even know if she thought about me after that. But she did. And so did he." A month passed. Time, which was supposed to fade things, only intensified the ache. Then one ordinary afternoon, Katie received an envelope. No sender. Inside was a single sheet of music. Clair de Lune by Debussy. At the bottom, handwritten. The music never stopped. "I just needed the right person to remind me." She knew. It was from him. And in that moment, she knew she had to see him again. 2 weeks later, Katie found herself in Boston for a lecture at the university. It was her chance. She didn't call. Didn't text. She just walked into the hospital where he worked, wearing a visitor badge and a heart pounding in her chest. When she asked for him at reception, they told her he was in the pediatric wing's new music room, part of a healing project using live piano music for young patients. She followed the signs. And when she opened the door, what she saw stopped her in her tracks. Jonathan, in his white coat, sat at a grand piano. Around him, children were laughing, some with 4 poles, others in wheelchairs. And he, completely lost in the moment, playing Clair de Lune with his eyes closed. The melody floated in the air like a whisper from fate. He opened his eyes mid-song, and there she was. Everything else faded. The hospital, the noises, the chatter. There was only her. The woman who had invaded his soul, challenged him, awakened him. Katie walked slowly toward him. "You play beautifully," she said, her voice soft. "You showed up," he said, eyes shining. "I had to know if it was just in my head." "It wasn't just you." She smiled. "I don't know what this is, Jonathan. But it feels real. And it scares me." "Everything worth it does," he replied. "Stay. For tonight. For as long as you want." The kids around them clapped, unaware of the adult storm brewing between looks and silence. But in that moment, their lives had found one another again, not in a hotel bar or through fleeting words. This time it was real. Daylight. With all the risk it carried. Katie sat next to him on the piano bench. He began to play again. And for the first time in a long while she felt peace. But what they didn't know yet was that the real journey had only just begun. Jonathan and Katie started to see each other more often. First in Boston, then in New York, then in little in-between towns where no one knew their names. Their lives were complicated, their schedules worse, but somehow they carved out moments. Moments that mattered. He showed her the joy of slowing down. of laughing at nothing, of eating pizza on hospital rooftops after midnight. She showed him how to feel, how to open old wounds without bleeding out, how to sit in silence and still feel heard. But love, even real love, doesn't erase reality. One night, after a fundraiser at the Boston Opera House, Katie looked distant. Jonathan noticed. "What's going on?" he asked, taking her hand. She hesitated. "I got a job offer. Geneva. 6 months. UN Human Rights Council." He froze. "That's incredible." "It is. And terrifying. And it's not in Boston." "No, it's not." They sat in silence, the kind that says everything without saying a word. "I'm not asking you to wait," she whispered. "And I'm not asking you to stay," he replied. The air between them was thick with things they couldn't say. She was chasing her purpose. He was rooted in his. Two people moving in the same direction but on different trains. That night they made love like people afraid of goodbyes. And in the morning she was gone. 6 months passed. Katie sent a postcard every week. No phone calls. No text. Just handwritten words that spoke more than technology ever could. He kept every one in a drawer next to his bed. Jonathan buried himself in work. But every time he passed a piano or heard laughter that reminded him of her, something in his chest tightened. One rainy night, after a 12-hour surgery, he returned home to find a final postcard waiting. A drawing of 2 chairs on a balcony overlooking Lake Geneva. Her words were simple. "The view is beautiful, but it's not home without you." He packed his bag the next morning. No dramatic speeches. No plane scenes. Just one man who had stopped running from love. When he arrived in Geneva, she was walking out of a cafe, laughing with a colleague. He turned, saw him, froze, then smiled. "I thought you'd show up," she said. He walked closer. "It took me too long." She touched his face gently. "You're just in time." And in that foreign city, far from the chaos of the past, they kissed again, not as two people searching, but as two hearts that had finally arrived. Geneva became their new beginning. They rented a modest apartment with creaky floors and large windows that opened to morning light and evening rain. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was real. Jonathan joined a local clinic, offering care in underserved communities. Katie worked on high-level policy briefs by day and wrote poetry in secret by night. They learned to live not around their work, but with each other at the center. One evening, as they sat on the balcony with a bottle of red wine and the lights of the city twinkling below, Jonathan turned to her. "I used to think love had to be loud," he said. "Big gestures. Wild declarations." Katie smiled. "And now I know it's this. Quiet. Unshakable." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think peace meant being alone. But you've changed the definition." In that moment they weren't just surviving anymore. They were building. Rewriting every chapter that had once been stained by fear, pressure, or pride. They were writing one of grace. On a crisp autumn morning, Jonathan walked into the cafe where they'd shared their first breakfast in Geneva. He was nervous, heart racing like he was about to give a TED Talk, not speak to the woman he woke up next to every day. Katie sat there reading, her glasses slipping down her nose, hair tied in a lazy bun. He knelt beside her with a small velvet box. "I don't want a perfect life," he said. "I want our life. The messy, mismatched, sometimes too serious, sometimes too silly life. With you." She looked down, blinking away tears. "I don't need the fairy tale," he continued. "Just your hand in mine. Forever." Katie closed the book. "Mile, you always did know how to ruin my mascara," she whispered. Then nodded. "Yes. Forever." They married in a vineyard outside Florence a year later. No grand audience, just the people who'd seen them grow, break, and heal. Katie walked down the aisle barefoot. Jonathan cried before she even reached him. And when they danced under the Tuscan stars, he whispered in her ear, "14A. Wrong seat. Right heart." She laughed through her tears. "Best mistake of my life."